All right. Friday's on the edge. So it looks like this should be going live any second now. And so for those who are watching today, it's just me, Nato, today. And since we just started this new group, I'm just going to first kind of get looking at like the chats and all that good stuff so that if anyone's around and dropping into the session, we can talk. Also, meanwhile, I've been doing a lot of things. So let me just see if there's anyone chatting anything, and let me just kind of go and review various questions because I've been getting some questions. So let's get into these questions this week because there's been a number of questions. So probably the first question that has been asked in general is like, what is edge? Since we are Fridays on the edge, what does the edge mean? Well, there is a new technology. So if anyone has ever heard of, say, like cloud native or cloud native computing, we've been talking about that lately these days. That's something that we are all about. So what this comes down to is edge computing is like you could think of it as a next iteration or a next evolution of cloud, or just computing in general, because cloud and edge aren't technically the same thing. They are different things. And it looks like the chat's working. So yeah, so welcome. So whatever questions you do have, feel free to ask what other questions you have as well. So I'm just here to help folks get going with things. So something I'm especially noticing folks are asking about lately is also about things like how to navigate a business in terms of like, people are always looking for how do you get work, and the difference between what we used to talk about in Free Coaching Fridays and the No Point group versus what I want to focus a little more on here are things that are a little more immediate to my own experience. So I'm a little more senior these days. So for folks who are looking for like more practitioner level work or trying to build a business, things like that, I've been getting a lot more questions in that general area. So for anyone who is trying to like actually build a business or trying to do something at that scale, that's something that we spend a lot of time just talking about business, helping people build businesses, things like that. But yeah, so edge computing, you could just think of it as like a new evolution, an extension of like where cloud. So if you think about like cloud, like if you think about like Google Drive is like cloud storage. Or if maybe we aren't talking about Google Drive, maybe we're talking about like AWS, which is just where we have like cloud infrastructure for people who are trying to build websites or build a business, build products, apps, whatever you're trying to do. But if we think about what about like on-prem, so servers in offices, edge computing in a lot of ways brings cloud and like on-prem together to where the idea of like the offices in your servers versus say like AWS, the two of them together in conjunction can be one environment. Microsoft's Azure cloud makes that much easier, I would say, than some of the other clouds. So Azure's a pretty sweet solution. But yeah, so anyways, some other things that we're talking about is I'd like to kind of talk about some of the updates in the dojo, because the new Facebook group for the cloud native engineers, this is something that is also attached to the DevSec Ops Dojo, because every single week, every single Thursday, so we just had a session last night, we had a private training session where we're getting into some labs and starting a specific sprint where we are sort of building like a mock or imaginary business and learning what is it like to go all the way from like we're going to role play what it's like to build a business from, what's it like to be the founder or the executive building this part of the business. Like, let's role play that out, and then going all the way from building a product to like getting a customer, things like that, using cloud technologies, leveraging cloud, all that good stuff. So that's something that we've been focused on lately. So we're getting into role plays for anyone who's been wondering what's going on in the dojo right now. I would say probably the majority of the members in here are either in the dojo or associated with the dojo. But like I said, we're just getting started with all of this. So we're trying to spread the knowledge beyond just our general core group. And so, especially for people who are trying to get into more leadership and trying to do things that are a little more ambitious. So, for those of you who, because a lot of folks have been talking about like how do you start a business, things like that. Maybe what I'll start talking about in some of these right now until we start getting more questions. Because whenever you start something new, we're not going to get a whole lot of questions until folks have been around for a little bit. It's just inevitable. It's just how new things work. I want to talk a lot about like those who are trying to either start with building a new product or a new company or something along those lines. Because one thing I'm running into is a lot of folks who get really technical lack a lot of the like, okay, so I have these technical skills, but who cares? Like, how do I make my technical skills matter? Because we used to focus a lot more on like teaching the technical skills and like a lot of the technical kung fu and things like that. But really, for anyone who's trying to really like scale their career, whether it's just to be a software engineer or like, you know, even if you want to be like a senior software engineer or practitioner, like a principal software engineer, something along those lines, or maybe you want to be a manager or a director. You know, none of them are necessarily better or worse than the other. But no matter what side of, say, like a cloud business you want to get into, if your goal is to be somewhere beyond just like being standard staffing or get past like senior level roles to where maybe you're like running a company or you're maybe like selling your own things, or maybe you're not quite that far, maybe you just want to be like a director or be an executive, things like that. I want to start talking about like what are the skills that help those bits come together, because a lot of that comes more down to like business, understanding just general business things. So that's something that I wanted to touch on. So I would say yes, it's indeed valuable, because that's another question I've been getting is it valuable for someone who's very technical to learn business skills? Or a common question lately that's also similar is how do you get more out of your technical skills? How do you get more out of your technical skills, or how do I go on to the next thing, or how do I keep growing? But it still comes down to the next thing is really just like understanding business things. It comes down to like understanding the people. So I would say, let's see, I'm not sure where the best place to start for that is in terms of like, so let's say someone wanted to go start a company and they wanted to know what's the first thing that I should care about that's going to make this company work. It's companies don't start off of an idea. An idea, sure, a company can sort of start off of an idea, but really a company starts off of, how do I put this? So an idea is, well, here's something. So like writing up a question. So, oh yeah, career path advice. Yeah, take your time. But yeah, like an idea is only as valuable as the execution of whatever idea. So you have to have like an audience or people who care about whatever that is. So yeah, no worries. So one thing that what anyone who watches this, you'll notice that I'll refrain from saying the name because I'm going to post this over on my YouTube too. So we'll maintain the privacy here. So whoever's asking questions, we're going to keep that private. That's another reason why I like to keep the Facebook group private, where people can just come in, ask questions. You don't have to out yourself or worry about like what the outside world thinks, because we're just in this Facebook group. That's why I like Facebook groups. It makes the chats less stressful, and you can just kind of like ask really what's on your mind without putting yourself out there too oddly. I don't even necessarily. Sometimes I debate if I'm going to put some of these videos out on YouTube, but sometimes it's nice to just know that if I don't want to put these videos out like beyond these walls, that I don't have to. So that's something that I'm looking forward to. And I know that because that's another question I've gotten is, why did we start a new Facebook group? The last Facebook group, since we've had the pivot, we did pivot out of Notia Point, so we're changing our branding around. So even though we had like an active group of a lot more members, the other reason why the new group is we're moving on from working more with like beginners, because a lot of the beginners we worked with are no longer beginners. So we're kind of moving with our audience And so the request that I've gotten lately is most of those who talk to us the most have more questions about more advanced career things than just getting beginner opportunities. But yeah, it's some things. But either way, it's nice having some change. And it is Friday, and my brain is fried. But yeah, businesses want people who understand the value of their skills. It doesn't matter what part of a business you go into. If you don't understand the value of your own skills and your technical, like if you're in engineering, sometimes it can be a lot harder to understand the value of your skills. If you're doing sales, I mean, if you're doing sales, obviously that's like, oh, I just made some sales. So it's a little more tangible. But I do find that it's a little more complicated to know, like, what's the value? Like, why should I learn Python? Or what language should I learn first? Because it's easy to get stuck in the weeds with little things like that, and I don't necessarily think any of those things matter that much. You know, whether or not you use Golang, Python, things like that, that's almost more just like, depends on company needs, things like that. But being able to have that discussion around, like, well, what are the company needs? The company needs that then might determine whether or not someone might use Python or Golang. I think that's something that I'm trying to focus on more these days. And then the Facebook group just gives me a little place to kind of like test out some of these ideas, kind of like talk some of this stuff out, and see like what all of you think as well as we get a little bigger. You might have noticed that we have a few new members this week. So for those of you who are just joining, welcome. I think we're up like 10 members this week. But yeah, you know, there's a good point in here. Good point. It says, it's easy to know the value of your skills if you're not in a cost center. If you spend time consulting and can see what you're being billed out for. Yes, I think that's a good, that's a good way to put it. Because it's like, if you know what you're billing for, and if you know like what you're delivering and where that's going, it's much easier to see like the value of your skills. I feel like, especially like consulting seems to me, because I've done consulting too, versus like working in a dark dungeon on the back end of like an engineering crew. And like when you're consulting, it's like you have that connectedness, and you have to do the billing, and then you have to go and like go through, depending on what you do, you have to do like an expense account every month and stuff like that. And so it can get very real with like consulting. Like, okay, so I know that I offered this service. These people are paying $450 an hour or $200 an hour. Well, it depends on what you're doing, I guess. But yeah, if you're, say, a person who is an architect, or let's say you go from consulting into like a more of an architect role, where really you do need people to leave you alone so that you can focus, because if everyone's bothering the architect, how are you going to get anything done? But sometimes, like, if a company doesn't give any feedback to this person who's creating things on the other side, it's like, I just see so many developers get like depressed. I'm just like, okay. that's been a discussion. It's like, well, does anything that I do matter? I'm like, well, it does matter. They're like, well, it doesn't feel like it matters. So that's something that I'm trying to figure out for like those of you who've been saying things like that to me. And I'm sorry that some of you feel that way with like with the kind of work that you might do, because it's a thing. I've been there doing some development work where I'm just like, I don't know, like what, like once I build this code and it's just like launched out to a void. And and that's a tricky thing for a manager to try to solve too, because as a manager, they're just trying to make sure that people are able to complete things. And well, some managers are just not good managers. I mean, there's that too. But even if you have a good manager, they might not realize how the experience feels for someone who is actually like building things and putting some of that work out there. So I don't know. It's a tricky thing. Now, I guess consulting and sales engineering are pretty similar things. So let's see. So let me read this one. So, like I said, I'll try to keep out any like personal information when I read these. So I'm not gonna like out anybody's name, because we're in a group here. Things will when it gets posted out to like YouTube, we'll have our privacy. So I'll just not share names. So like background, was a bartender and went back to school. in software and got an associate's in web development. So basically like code basics and then just different languages in code, and got an internship and did some code scripting, application support, access management, all that good stuff. Then got an IT pro contract for a few months, and now back to application support maintenance. Over COVID, completed the number of certifications. So we have a number of certifications. That's some hard work. Good work, by the way. That's a lot of learning, and all learning to me is valuable, and that's something that I'll talk about after I finish reading through this. I think education in general, like the power that you get from knowledge in the tech sphere is very different from, say, like the knowledge you get in other industries. So tech school, five years of actual like support, access management, scripting experience, putting yourself back on the market, and then if you okay, so if I were you with those skills, would I look for what would I look for in the next role for someone like that? No, that's a good question. So like if I were you and I had about 5 years of experience doing support, access management, and like scripting experience, this combination is pretty unique. So let's talk about this, and then I'll think about this as I talk it through. Just because that is a lot of information to talk through, but I like talking through this sort of thing, so this is good. So let's say this was me. Let's say that I did have like 5 years experience, and mind you, to me 5 years experience is quite a bit. And then also if you have education, so let me talk lightly on the value of like college, because college is an interesting one. On one end, the information you learn in college, yes, that part's valuable, sure, but something else that college brings like a tremendous value to is like when you go to employers, there's a high risk at employers when companies try to hire you. That's like, what's that risk? And I've run into this as a business owner. It's a very complicated thing. You get folks who you work with and kind of start and then never finish. And most people, I would say, but there's a lot of reasons why people don't finish whatever they're doing. Sometimes it means that maybe they need more experience with certain things, but someone who went to college, started college, and finished college, that means that they've gone through a process of finishing what they've started. And for someone who doesn't have like a really complicated thing that they've gone through like that might even take years, that they started and finished, then something like trying to get into a business or trying to do like 5 years worth of career planning, like without that context or like that life experience of going through something complicated and finishing it, it changes the risk. So I would say that value in being like a web dev graduate, the education's absolutely valuable. Yes, that part's valuable too. But what's really kind of like the super valuable part in that is that means that you're someone who's like gone through this process and you've completed whatever you've set out to do of something that's really not easy. College is a bear. You know, you got to figure out like financial things to do it. You got to structure your life around it. You got to make sacrifices. All of that, it factors into building long-term habits too. So it's not just like you know how to do something, but it's like in order to like constantly submit reports, if you go into say like a research space, it's going to feel like college. So if you get into like a threat research type of role, it's going to feel a whole lot like college. And someone who goes into say like a research role and doesn't have that experience, it can be a little jarring coming from say like something where they maybe came from a 9 to 5 doing who knows what, any 9 to 5 technical job. It could be software engineering. And then all of a sudden they get into more like research and development where they have to like submit certain types of deliverables and complicated things like that. That's tricky. So anyways, I would say there's a lot of value in that. And so that right there, I would say you could just single-handedly, like with that grad experience, look into considerations around like something that's research related or R&D related. And then on top of that, you so happen to have support experience, which is very valuable. That means that you know how to work with customers, you've worked with customers, and that means that you already know what it's like to work with good and bad customers. And so then access management, that means that you probably have some degree of understanding how to work with like user access, like privilege escalation, things like that. That I would assume you probably had to just deal with in a working capacity, which is different from an educational capacity. And then on top of that, you have scripting experience, which tells me that you've like taken processes, baked those processes down into repeatable processes, and then coded it so that that then process can run by itself. The types, I would say, like you could get into a like a research type of role doing like with that type of a background, because you understand people. I don't know. I feel like that's a great background if you're interested in research. I don't know if you're interested in research. But for those of you who are interested in research, then that's something as well. So now, some other things. Let's see. What are some other types of roles that would be, like, what other types of roles would I look for? You know, you could probably get into, I mean, there's a lot of opportunities for that kind of a background. I would say that's a pretty flexible background, where you could either go into something that's a little more like consulting, where you're working with people, if that interests you. So I guess the question is, do you like working with people? If you like working with people, I think consulting is a great step to take, because with consulting you kind of put those skills to the test, and then if you like people, that's a good thing that you're around people. If you don't like people, maybe we rule that one out. But anyways, like consulting, like you can still leverage all of your technical skills. You might script things for different clients, different customers, different situations, different cases, all that good stuff. And so if not a consultant, let's say that you don't want something that's so people facing, and maybe you do want the experience of coding in the deep dark corner and doing more of the like the architect type of stuff. If you've done support work and things like that, I mean, you could just go work in an engineering team, like a network operations center or a security operations center would be something that you'd probably be able to get a lot out of, or like working in like disaster recovery. You know, something like a disaster recovery type role could be interesting. For a background like that. Lots of options, honestly. You know, you could go into more of the cloud side. You could go into more of the security side. I would say there's, in some ways, I would look for a niche, because it's kind of hard to narrow experience like that, which makes it hard to figure out how to choose something. And then I would say, in my opinion, the best way to nicheify is think about like, what are the things that you enjoyed doing the most based on what you've done in the past. Take those things that you liked doing, like really like chew on that, and think about like, why did you like doing those things? Because was it the people that made it fun? Like, did you like doing a certain job because like that team, you're just like, that was a good team? And another thing I will say, that it's probably infinitely more important to focus on finding like a team you like working on versus the day-to-day jobs, because with that type of skill set, like beyond being like more people facing or less people facing, like the next big question is going to be, you know, do you like working with the people? You know, and if you like working with the people, then other things can come into place, and you can talk about future opportunities, and you can grow with people. I am, some of my advice seems to rub some people the wrong way. So one advice that rubs you the wrong way that I'll say is I don't frown on job hopping. I've even had people job hop on me, and I think it's like good on them. Like, I think like do what you need to do to make sure that you get what you want. And I say it makes other like business owners salty when I say stuff like that, but I'm a business owner, so I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, if someone comes in, gets some experience, and bounces to do what's right for them, help them. I don't know, like help them get what they want. Oftentimes you'll find that, you know, even as like a business owner, helping other people make like their transition, well, you know, they might even make recommendations to the next person to come in, or who knows what. But you know, I would say sample jobs, like sample roles. Go at a company, spend 3 months there, see what you think. If it's like 3 months and you're just like, especially if the team's not cutting it, I would say evaluate, like, do you like the team? And then just start thinking about that. doesn't mean that you have to leave in 3 months. I would say close a new opportunity before just jumping to another one. Don't just like randomly jump to new opportunities. And be honest with people. If you're unhappy at a place, tell them. Because honestly, if you're unhappy and you tell folks sometimes, they'll go and they'll change things around and try to work with you. So I think it's important to be open about like, this isn't working, and that over there is not working. It can sometimes feel like you might get fired saying some things. I will say that you can. I've had times where I've said things that have gotten me like, I don't, it depends. Oftentimes people end up wanting to work with me in the future, so I don't know about that. But they'll not want to work with me for a little bit. It depends on what I've been doing lately. But folks end up usually wanting to come back and work with me. So I mean, you can't make people that upset. I don't know. Even if you do get fired, and if you get fired, I don't know, like, you find a new opportunity. But I think it's important to speak your mind at companies, and it's important to tell people like what you want there and why are you there in the first place? Why do you want to be at this company? And if a company is a stepping stone, there are some companies that you can tell them that they're a stepping stone, and they'll even help you find the next alley-oop. They might even tell you like, well, we would love it if you worked with one of our partners so we could still maintain a relationship. And then maybe they go send you over to work with a partner. And then you don't work with them directly anymore, but you're still in their ecosystem. You're still, around their business partners. And so you can even tell a company that you see them a certain way. You just talk to people. Now, if you're in a period where you're just trying to get your life together, sometimes you do need to just hold down a job for a little bit. Like that exists too. Sometimes folks just need a moment to think. If you're at a period where your goal is to like learn or think, I guess one thing I will say to be careful of is to try to not have too many goals at once when money's involved. Because when you have too many goals at once, when money's involved, you put your bills at risk. And you don't want to do that. What I mean is like, especially if you're an entrepreneur. If you're not an entrepreneur, it's not as bad, but it's like taking certain risks that put your paycheck in jeopardy. You want to make sure that you're not in a situation where you need that paycheck. If you're in a situation where you need the paycheck, then you can usually strategize, and it might make sense to try to see if you can find a specialist who can help you plan in the direction that you want to plan in. I focus on like 3-year plans and things like that, but like my niche is like cloud and stuff like that. If someone's not into getting into like cloud and DevSec Ops and Edge, then whatever planning I could give you is probably useless. But for someone who wants to like chart out paths in that direction, it's like, I might help folks in that way. But there's all kinds of folks out there who can chart you a path in different directions. I guess it really just depends on what people are trying to accomplish. Everyone is. Some folks are so much more ambitious than others, and some folks don't have any ambition, and not in a bad way either. Just like some folks are just like, I feel like every ambitious person needs the chill friend. Because if you don't have a chill friend and you're like just too hellbent, then you just be this person who just feels crazy all the time. So Laura couldn't make it to the session. The chats showing up as Cloud Underground are Laura, so she's saying hi. I guess it's I think she's trying to talk from her phone or something like that. But yes, so Laura is out doing other things, and so that's why you just get me today. Me who rants. I'm the person who rants. When Laura's here, she breaks up my ranting, so it's not just like me ranting. But yeah, so anyways, like I said, when I'm left to just talk by myself, I give all of the wildly unpopular advice like job hop, do the right thing for you, focus on what's going to help you, and the employer will deal with it and they'll survive. And I coming from what I've come from, I don't feel bad for employers so I don't know. Like if an employer is salty that you bounced and maybe you bounced because they treated you poorly, maybe they should have treated you right. So I don't know. I think leaving companies in a lot of ways holds companies accountable, because it's up to companies to make it worth you staying at their company. I think about those things. I'm like, I know for me, I'm not going to stay at a company that's not worth my time. It's just it just doesn't make any sense to me anyways. And, you know, I'll put it this way too. In the tech sphere, you make so much money that if you're even semi-decent with money, you can get to 7 months savings at a lot of jobs. So if you're coding doing just about anything, then if the job's that bad, move into a place with lower rent. And if you got like 6 figures and you move into a place where rent is like a studio for like 2 or 3, like, I don't know, like a 6 month lease or something like that in a studio, you could walk away with enough money to just like quit and just be like, I'm just gonna be done for a while until I figure out what I want to do. So anyways, like I said, I think it's important to keep companies accountable. People keep me accountable. I think it's important. So, you know, like, I try to talk to the folks in the dojo, and it's like if someone unsubscribes, that's accountability. If someone decide, or maybe it's just that something it wasn't right for them and something along those lines. But either way, I guess those are a lot of my thoughts. I think it's fine to just like sample companies and try different things out. You know, we live in a new era, and a lot of businesses who don't adapt to the modern climate. Like, what is the modern work climate, if we're honest? If you wanted to make money, you could go get a job at Uber. You could go, you know, if you have a big enough place, you could do like Airbnbs, different things like that. But we have gig economies these days that are online and all this stuff. And if you can try Lyft versus Uber and there's no consequence to it, or you can work for Lyft and Uber at the same time, I don't know why it wouldn't make sense to be like, well, why can't I just like sample these different companies until I find one who can treat me right, or one that I enjoy being at, you know, or ideally both. I would always veer toward choosing a company based on the team first, because if you work with good people and you don't like what you do, you can talk to them until they work with you and get you doing something that you actually like doing. If you work with people who are terrible to work with, it's just non-negotiable. And you know, you tell them what you want, who cares? And I mean, they probably don't. And it's pretty, I would say you can probably sniff out a company in an interview, like what kind of company they are. You can tell if they actually care about things. The number one question I asked people I'm interviewing is like, do you like your job? Do you like being here? Tell me something you like about your job. If they have nothing to say that they like about their job and they're just miserable there, that usually to me makes me think to myself that I'm not so sure that I would work with this company, you know, well, realistically, because if like the person you're interviewing with doesn't even want to be there, they might hire you and then they might be leaving in the next like 2 months, you know, and that to me is crazy. So like if that's a red flag you can avoid, I have had conversations with people who are like, you know, I mean, it's just crazy here, and I just warn you, if you take this job, I just warn you, it's gonna be, and they'll tell you all the things they hate about it, and they'll just like get into it, and they'll be like, oh yeah, and this one time, and then let me just tell you. And so if you can if you can gauge like what other people think about like their own job, a hiring manager who's miserable is also probably not going to give a very good interview, because they probably just don't even care. They're like, I don't even care that I'm hiring for this company. And so it's really interesting when you get, because last year I spent a lot of time helping folks through interviews and stuff like that, and you see a lot of this reflect that way too, which is kind of a fascinating thing. And people do this thing where they go into an interview and they're like, oh, these people just aren't very nice. And they'll go do stuff, and then I'll be curious because I'll hear the same feedback from the same company, and the same company will be like, oh, that company, I got an interview at this company. There's one company, I don't know if I should say the name of them. Maybe what I do is type the name of them in the chat in Facebook so that I'm not just like outing this company, because it's not my goal to just like stomp on these companies. But anyways, if you just see like the name of a company in the Facebook chat, just like a company, I hear these complaints like constantly from like even just in the interview process. So I had to go talk to one of them, and I was like, tell me about your experience here. I need to know. Because I just hear the same feedback from all these interviewees, and they're like, oh, these people are just like, I don't know. And they're just like, oh, I'm miserable here. I don't like it here. And there were a few people who there was one person who, maybe two, was it one or two? And it was at least one person who got hired there, who I was working with, and I think it was like a month, and they already quit. Man, it might have been two. I don't know, but let me just be blunt about that. It's like you can figure out if it's going to be miserable because think about this. If it might be exciting to get a job, but if that job is like going to prison, think about how long, like if you got bills to pay and stuff like that, then you're going to be there for a while, and you're just going to be like sitting there behind those bars just wondering like, why am I in this place at this company doing these things with these terrible people who I really don't like working with. Now, I don't know if things have gotten better there, so I should say this from like a businesses have people in them, which means that sometimes bad people get fired, sometimes new good people get hired, and sometimes they solve problems so that things eventually get better if people seem to care about things. So I guess it's kind of a hit or miss thing. And they're not the only company, but they're that company that I wrote down is probably the one I hear the most feedback like that from, or at least last year. So, I would say like in interviews and things like that, don't, I guess if you really need money, you need money. I mean, there's that situation too. And but sometimes you have to ask the question of like, is it worth it? So anyways, that's me just talking about a whole bunch of things today. Let's see, I do have some other questions. Let's see, what other questions do we have? Because one thing I'll probably do is I used to go ahead and take questions from like LinkedIn too. So one thing I might start going back to is like gathering questions from the greater community, because we don't do these right at 5 every week. We do them after 5. But like this is like 3-day weekend coming up. I'm done working with stuff. I don't want to do any more like real work. I'd rather just like sit here and just like talk about life things at this time. But we used to just like accept questions from different locations. For now, we'll just stick to Facebook. I think sometimes it gets so like overcomplicated trying to like keep up with things that slower is better. So I'm not in a hurry to speed anything up because I have so much going on all the time anyways that I like. We only got 26 members right now. At some point there's me like 500 members in here, and it's gonna be chaos and madness. And so if I've learned anything with small audiences, they don't last long. And so I try to enjoy those days now, because I'm like, all right, it's gonna turn into chaos, but this is the time when we don't have chaos yet. Oh, so anyways, let's see some other questions. Talk about, oh yeah, so what's the ramp on like for the dojo, and then what can someone expect in the first 30 days? So we are doing like a dojo relaunch, so that's a good question. So dojo wise, what are we doing with the dojo, and what would you expect in the next 30 days? So if I'm going to be blunt, I'm kind of at a point where I've been throttling the growth of the dojo, because I just kind of want to focus on the members who are there. But I'm 100% open to folks who are interested in coming into the dojo to join. What we're doing is a sprint at this time. I will say that I am looking at up to 2 applicants at this time still. And so we do have a dojo application. Let me link that. I don't know if it's linked. Well, it's probably linked somewhere, but I'll link it in the chat, like the application to the dojo. And then I'll just talk about like, what is the dojo? What would you expect in the next 30 days? And like, what do we do in the dojo? The vision of the dojo is a lot clearer these days. So anyways, let me get that link. So just give me a second while I'm clicking around. Okay. So let me just paste that in the chat. So to find the application to the dojo, You will find the application here. There is some general information in that link, but let me talk about like what's going on and like what you would expect. So the DevSec Ops Dojo, the whole purpose of the DevSec Ops Dojo, really, ultimately, like my goal is to help people grow their careers to like for people who are at more of like a practitioner level. That's what the dojo was kind of founded for. And for really, it comes down to more like your personal goals. I would say your personal goals matter more than your skill level for the DevSec Ops Dojo, and the types of personal goals that work well for what we're trying to accomplish be like folks who have an interest in someday building your own business, being an executive, being more of like a principal level engineer, creating like your own technology or creating like a nonprofit, but really more like those levels of things. But the thing that all of those have in common that we talk about is building and delivering cloud assets. Like, what are those? Like, what does that mean? So really, it's kind of it's an ambitious place with ambitious people for those who are like, oh yeah, I'm ambitious. I want to go be around other ambitious people. Now, what we do, so like if someone were to sign up for the DevSecOps Dojo right now, one thing that I started doing is I'm setting up one-on-ones right now, which is a new thing that we're doing. But every Thursday at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, what we do is we do just like a general dojo training and session. What those trainings and sessions are like for learning those things. So right now we're doing labs and role plays over the next few months for what does it look like to build an entire company, and then we're going to have some labs and then do some role plays around actually like building a company, and then we're going to like us as Cloud Underground are going to be a fake customer to the DevSec Ops Dojo. Now, technically, the DevSec Ops Dojo is owned by the Cloud Underground, but we're going to pretend like the dojo is its own company. So the members of the dojo, all of you are running that company. We're going to role play that way. That's what we're doing in the dojo at this time. And right now, we have to close a deal because we're starting a penetration testing company for chaos engineering. So it's a chaos engineering company that we started, and next week is a role play for like what's it like if you're the executive through the experience. If you're trying to build this company to get these services out, build the services, and then we're going to deliver these services. How does that work? And then we're building a Minecraft server for the Cloud Underground that we're going to use as like the Cloud Underground's infrastructure that the dojo is going to pen test for us. And so then we're going to do it in the format of, instead of like an actual pen test, we're going to have a chaos engineering tournament. That's going to be around August. So for those who are interested in participating in the chaos engineering tournament, and what that is if you're participating in the tournament, that means that you've learned like, how would a business that does chaos engineering have been built? What does that look like? What's the process for a startup to be built? Like, how does that work? What are the different roles? What do all the different roles look like? What do the different people do in those different roles? And then how do we take code, and then we're using chaos engineering as just a single use case because we're going to do different sprints in the dojo. But every dojo we're going to have new sprints. Right now this sprint is for chaos engineering. Later on maybe it'll be a different type of product or a different type of solution. But anyways, yeah, and then we're going to have a tournament in August to be like the delivering of the service. So anyways, that's kind of what's going on in the DevSec Ops Dojo. We're just going through this whole process of seeing what is it like to build a business, like how does that work, what are the things that make that happen, for a company who's focused particularly on cloud and edge-based DevSec Ops types of solutions. So anyways, that's what we're going to be doing. We're every time we complete one of these sprints, we're going to use a different type of company. So like, while this might be chaos engineering, like I was just saying, maybe the next one will be like maybe a malware analysis company, or maybe like a web hosting company that sells, I don't know, whatever we come up with in the next sprint. We usually do votes, so I talk to everyone in the Thursday sessions and ask, like, get everyone's interest on what they would like to learn. So anyways, that's what we do in the DevSec Ops Dojo, and then I also talk through things like more specific, like more directly, like if you want to just like DM me all the time about like your career options and things like that, like that's what the dojo's there for. It just provides infrastructure and a place for that, and at this point we have enough members where like folks are, now there's enough of us to talk to each other, so we just kind of have our own little jam there. So that's what's going on in the DevSec Ops Dojo. But yeah, so it's one of those things that's going to be going on for years, so it's not going anywhere. If it's something that you're curious about, you don't necessarily have to nosedive into the DevSec Ops Dojo. If that's something you want to do, you could do it now or later, but feel free to reach out to me if that is something that you want to get into, and feel free to take a look at that link if you want to apply to that. And like I said, it's for, I guess, really for folks who are very like lifestyle focused, who really want to build like a lifestyle around this sort of stuff. But yeah, and then the Facebook group is where we've decided to just like let things be a lot more casual, a lot more just like chill. And then, you know, here in the Facebook group, it's not like face to the cement all the time. I like face to the cement, just like working really hard and doing things all the time. But the Facebook group is the place where it's a little more chill. and we're not always doing a million things. We are going to have some trainings in the Facebook group coming up here, because one thing I like about Facebook is it has like a learning management system in the groups. So we can actually build little classes in here, so that's something that we're planning out. And another thing is, keep an eye out. I should start talking about weekly progress on this, like progress on the packaging of the Olympiad software. So I've been working on some software called the Olympiad. It's something that if anyone's followed me for a while, you probably hear me talk about it enough. And it's basically a cloud engineering and development toolbox for building cloud and automating cloud and making that easier. And it's all open source. And we are going to probably start hosting the availability of that here. So for anyone who wants to be able to just start playing with our cloud engineering tools, and whether you're trying to just build a minimum viable product, or maybe you're just trying to learn. Maybe you're not trying to build a product. Maybe you're not trying to actually do real engineering. Maybe you're just trying to learn things. You can do that too. And our software works on anything that can run Docker, essentially. So if you can run Docker or Kubernetes, it'll work on your hardware. So we are going to keep that the early release of the Olympiad software here, and then once folks in the Facebook group give us pretty good feedback, because when you're releasing something new, you want to have a place where you can get good feedback from people who you can talk to routinely, so it's not just like thrown out to a million people and then they're like, what is this? So that's why we want to make sure that we can talk about it and start building some training around it and see what all of you think, and make the tool as good as we can make it before we make like an official like public release. So it's not that it's not public. Obviously anyone can just join this Facebook group, great, and then they can use the stuff and it's going to be free, so it's not going to cost anything. But we're going to not release it outside of this right away. All of you in here are welcome to use whatever code we put in here however you want. There's not going to be any... I don't like making weird legal restrictions on things. It's like something I'm not into. Like that sort of thing stresses me out. And I don't like trying to tell people how to live their lives and how to use their code and what they're allowed to do with their code that they just built. So whatever code we release in here, if you like use that code and you make something with it, that's yours. That's your stuff. It's not mine. It's yours. It's on your systems. It's your things. Do whatever you want with it. Because we're more interested in enabling and helping people be able to accomplish things, and something that I see as a barrier to making that happen is adding red tape and weird sticky glues. And while I do like the Facebook group for just kind of privacy purposes, like it's all going to eventually get released outside of the Facebook group too. This is just more of like a quality control thing for like, why aren't we releasing it out of here? It's like, well, I want to try to actually make it good, so I don't want to just have pure chaos with our early releases of our software packages. So anyways, we'll be doing more of these in the future. For those who are pretty much trying to move a planet, the dojo might be for you. And then for those who are kind of at a point where you're trying to kind of make decisions, like, feel free to just come in here, talk to us. We're going to be doing these every week. We won't always do them necessarily right at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. It'll be after 5 sometime. So I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping up this week's. And normally Laura will be here too. And one nice thing about when Laura's here is she has a perspective from someone who doesn't have some of the like deep engineering experience that I have. And it's really hard for me to talk from a perspective of someone who hasn't, like, I guess, like, because I come from like big enterprise ecosystems with like multi-million-dollar infrastructure and like annual, like, systems where the annual bill is like somewhere north of $500,000 a year just to like keep the infrastructure running on an annual basis. And so like she's a lot better at like connecting from like what about for people who've never done those things and are trying to get into that, like, well, how does it feel from like that, more of that perspective. So I don't really have a very quality perspective on from that standpoint, but she's good for that, and she has all kinds of other insights too, because she comes from a different background, of course, that's a lot more like, I can't make things look good to save my life. When we were doing Free Coaching Friday, I do like doing the whiteboard sessions. I'll probably do some whiteboard sessions again, but like all these fancy designs and stuff, and then like making things make sense, I am not good at those things. So, you know, there's a place for all skills in cybersecurity, and the skills to make things look good are just as valuable as the skills to make things work well, and you really need both. So anyways, we'll be back. We'll be doing more of these, and I just appreciate everyone who's been dropping into these. So we'll be also doing a lot more recruiting up soon. We might. I'm not that motivated to recruit, if I'm going to be really blunt. But we will, because I do want us to grow and things like that, and I do want to increase the size of the group, and I do want to create a good experience. So we are going to be focusing on growth, but there will be a time when we'll probably focus more on growth than at this time. So we'll probably grow slowly for now, and then we'll grow a little faster as we go. So thanks again, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up, and then this will get uploaded probably sometime next week on YouTube too, for folks who missed this. But folks who are in the Facebook group can watch this anytime, because it's just in here. Also, I will say that the YouTube version gets edited, so things that I don't really want outside of this group stay in this group. So then so if you want to see like the raw rants, this is where it's at. So thanks again, and we'll talk again.